Okay, right. Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body of the 10th of March 2022. I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Can I please ask members to appoint a chair for the meeting?
Could I propose Councillor Campbell?
I'll second that.
Councillor Campbell, are you happy to accept the role of chair?
Yes, I'll do that, Claire. Thanks very much, members. You want me just to go ahead, Claire?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council's website for public listening. Please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when not addressing the meeting. Right, speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. I will also look out for hands going up as well. The usual standing orders apply, including that any vote will be undertaken by roll call. So you've already said that we're quorate. Do you want to do the sederant, Claire?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. I can confirm we've got 4 members present today. As well as yourself, we've got Councillor Ian Carruthers, Councillor Giusti and Councillor Young. We've got 2 apologies, being from Councillor McClelland and Sloan. Councillor Young is actually here as a substitute. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Are there any declarations of interest? I don't see anybody coming in. Okay, members, we'll move on. Could I ask the clerk to confirm that there are 2 notices of reviews for this consideration in this meeting and take us through the first one, please? Thanks, Claire.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The first of those 2 notices of review is item 4, land next to 5 Logan Road, Gretna, refusal of planning permission for erection of dwelling house 211543 full, with the usual papers in your pack, papers, notice of review, the report and handling, observation of the appointed officer, planning application form, decision notice, relevant extracts from the LDP2 and the photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are on pages 66 and 67 of your papers, being the proposed dwelling house is not in keeping with the density, appearance and pattern of the development of the surrounding area. As such, the proposal is considered to be contrary to the terms of policy OP2, design quality of new development in the Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2 and associated supplementary planning guidance. And 2, the location and size of the application site would mean that the proposed dwelling house and garden would have an unacceptably low level of privacy and amenity due to it being within close proximity of other residential properties in 5 Silver Hill Place. In particular, it's considered that proposed dwelling house would have a negative impact on both neighbouring dwellings and future residents in terms of privacy, sunlight and daylight. As such, the proposal is considered to be contrary to the terms of policy OP1 development considerations in the Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2. Requested method of determination is that it be on the basis of the review documents only with no further procedure. Grounds stated in the notice of review are in summary. The proposed application is felt to be appropriate for the vacant site and the surrounding area, which is made up of small-scale housing units and is consistent with the finishes of adjacent properties. It is felt that ample amenity space is available for the size of the dwelling from the rear, front and side and has been designed so no windows are overlooking. Car parking is provided, but equally the site is within easy walking distance of shops and other amenities. You have the relevant development plan policies being LTP Plan 2, the OP1, OP2, H1, IN8, IN9, T2 and the guidance, design quality and placemaking. The main issues for the LRB that they may wish to consider are: does the proposal comply with the terms of the development plan? In particular, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP policy OP2 and associated LDP2 supplementary guidance document? Specifically, would the proposed dwelling house be in keeping with the density of the surrounding area? Would the proposal be in keeping with the appearance of the surrounding area? Does the proposal meet the terms of LDP2 policy OP1? Specifically, would the proposed dwelling house of garden have an unacceptable low level of privacy and amenity? Would the proposal have a negative impact on neighbouring dwelling houses in terms of privacy, sunlight and daylight? Would the proposal have a negative impact for future residents in terms of privacy, sunlight and daylight? And if it's not considered that the proposal accords with the terms of the development plan, are there a set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development plan? If so, what reasons would members give for such a decision if it were considered that the proposal departed from the terms of the development plan? If members are minded not to uphold the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission in principle for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if any? And if members are minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision, what changes to specific reasoning for the decision would be required? So, having outlined the documents within your papers, it falls to the LRB to determine if it has sufficient information to consider the review. It is confirmed that there will be no representations from any party heard today. The options available to the local review body are that it can decide it has sufficient information before it to enable it to determine the review today, request further information in form of written representations. The LRB would be required to state precisely the information it was seeking and who would provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who would be invited to speak and on what matters. Resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, and this can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would obviously not allow a decision to be made today. And if this local review body resolves it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. Decision notice would include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. You have a planning advisor present at your meeting in relation to this case. It is confirmed that they have not had any involvement in this case. We're not the case officer or the appointed officer for this application. They are purely here to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process to the local review body. You'll also have a solicitor present here today. They will act independently if the local review body require any specific advice on matters of law. So if members are clear, no further clarification is required. I'll ask the Chair now to lead the debate and in the first instance to lead the local review body through the agenda papers together to decide if you have sufficient information to make a determination today.
Thank you very much, Claire. Members, what I was going to start off with is a presentation from David Sutty to give us the photographs that we see in colour, and then we'll go through the each of the sections, section 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., individually. So if any members got questions or comments they wish to add for clarification, and after that, I will ask the LRB if they've got sufficient enough information. So if members are content, I've got it's Andrew Robertson for this item. Sorry, my apologies. So if members are content, Ian.
Thanks, yeah. I just wondered if we could come back and have we got to make that decision at this point in time? I thought what you're proposing is a methodology, so to speak, that we actually go through the presentation, see what the pictures are like. Because when I looked at something, do we need a site visit? But the pictures might be absolutely appropriate. So if we could left that point in the process till after the pictures, might feel content here if that's okay with you.
Well, I mean, if we go through each of the sections. I was thinking, there may be other things, points of clarity that needs arisen, but once I come to the end of each of the sections there, and I was going to come back and ask if we've got sufficient enough information. If you feel that a site visit needs to give you that sufficient information, we can deal with that just at the end. Is that okay?
That's perfect, Chair. Thank you.
You content with that, Ian?
Yes, Chair,
I
definitely.
take it other members are okay with that as well? I don't see anybody else coming in. So, Andrew, do you want to take members through the presentation, please, and then we'll go through the papers? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Moving to the first slide. Yeah. Okay, so the application site is situated on a corner plot with Logan Road situated to the west and Silverhill Place situated to the northern side. And the application site, as you can see from this photograph, is effectively an area of hard standing with Silverhill Place to the north and the property of 5 Logan Road to the south, and to the east of the site is 5 Silverhill Place. And this photograph is taken from Logan Road looking towards the site and the front elevation of 5 Logan Road. Moving on to the next slide is a closer shot of the site. So you can see it there. It's effectively a squarish site, square rectangular site, which is bounded by fencing to 3 sides and hedge to the eastern side, of which it bounds 5 Silverhill Place. And you can see 5 Logan Road is visible on the right. And moving to the final slide, this is taken looking south towards the site. So on the left-hand side, that's the junction with Silverhill Place. And you can see the application site just beyond the car there on the photograph, where you've got the gable end of 5 Logan Road, and also the you can see 5 Silverhill Place as well. So that's all the photographs that have been submitted with the presentation.
Thanks very much for that, Andrew. Okay, members, we'll go through the papers. The first section, section 1, which is the notice of review and related documents, pages 15 to 23. Has any members got any concerns, questions, observations they wish to make? Don't see any hands up. Section 2, the report on handling and related correspondence, pages 27 to 43. Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to section 3, which is observations of the appointed officer on the applicant agent's notice of review, pages 47 to 48. Any questions? No. Section 5, decision of notice. Section 4, planning application form submitted on the 16th of June 2021, pages 51 to 61. Any questions? Section 5, decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council, date 25th of October 2021, pages 65 to 70. Any questions? Okay. Section 6, the relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, pages 73 to 79. Any questions? No. And section 7, photos of the application site and the locality, pages 83 and 84, which we've clearly seen on the presentation. Any questions? No. Okay, members. as I said, once we went through the papers, I would come back and ask, have we got sufficient enough information in front of us to make a determination today? Ian, you wanted to come back in for a point for a site visit.
Just potentially, Chair, just to kind of pick up in the mood of the LRB itself, the committee itself. I just wondered, did we have, maybe should have come in before this, have we got a satellite view of the site? It would have just, other than that, I mean, that's a bit that really would help me put it into context. To me, it looks like a vacant site. You look at it there, you see the picture in front of us, which would be a natural, it'd be classed as white land, I think, would be the correct terminology, inside a kind of quite a fairly large settlement in comparison to others in Dumfries and Galloway. And you think it would naturally be up for development, but obviously it's been determined that's not the case. So I just wondered if, even for me, the bit that's really missing, can I see what it looks like in context with better graphics as what we've got within the papers, Chair? I can't access anything else at this moment in time to have a look. That's possible.
Yeah, I don't think there's a satellite, but there is a site plan in the documents, which clearly sets out its relationship to the houses round about. I don't know if Andrew could maybe advise, or maybe he's got a satellite picture he could maybe show you. I don't know. I'll ask Andrew if he can help me out on this one. Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. I was pretty much going to say the same thing as what you said. At the minute, there is no satellite image that's been submitted as part of the documents. Whether I could try and share the screen and show a satellite image on Google Maps, I suppose that's the only thing I can refer you to. But in terms of what you've got in front of you in the papers, it is just the block plan and the location plan, which does show the sort of the layout, particularly the location plan is at a scale to 1 to 2,500. So it does show the layout of the surrounding area in quite a wide detail. But we don't have a satellite image of the site as part of the papers.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll come back to you on that, Ian. I've got some more speakers wishing to speak. So I've got Councillor Young and then Councillor Giusti. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. We've been told we always have to make decisions based on what's in front of us now. I actually had a look at Google satellite views, and it shows the geometric pattern of this housing scheme very clearly. And I'm quite surprised it wasn't included as part of the procedure for this decision. So I personally feel I've got sufficient evidence in front of me to make a decision today.
Thank you. Councillor Giusti.
Thanks, Chair. Again, Chair, just like Councillor Young, I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to planning. I like to go onto satellite images and stuff like that and take a peek and get a feel, go down the road on that myself. But I had a question for the officer, actually. And under reasons for the refusal on page 31, and it was just reason 2, and it was talking about the property in Garden would have an unacceptably low level of privacy and amenity due to its close proximity to other residential properties. So this takes me back to a previous plan committee just a couple of months back, maybe last month, where we had a very similar situation. And that was never raised as an issue. So I know that we're going on the merits of this one application, but my question is there a clear guideline on what is acceptable amenity? I mean, or is I don't want to say pick and choose, but how do we get a feeling? How does the officer get a feeling of that's not good amenity and that's too close? Or is there any kind of measurements or any rules that dictate that? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Giusti. I'll ask Andrew if he can help you out on that one. Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, General Policy OP1 of the LDP sets out criteria that we assess proposals against in terms of whether a proposal will give rise to land use conflict. And of relevance to this proposal, you have potential loss of privacy, sunlight and daylight on adjoining properties. Now, obviously each case is assessed on a case-by-case basis, but in terms of the reasons that are listed in the reason for refusal, privacy, sunlight, and daylight, that's a judgment call that will have been taken by the case officer doing the recommendation and the appointed officer who's issued the decision. And in this case, when you look at the block plan that's been submitted, the judgment that's been made, from what I can see, is the close proximity of the dwelling to, I would say, the property of concern being number 5 Silver Hill Place. So it's close proximity to that property, which is a 5-metre garden area. There's also you have to take into account the orientation of the property in terms of where the sun would be shining as well. So in this case, that would, all of those factors would have been taken into account. There is some information in the design quality supplementary guidance, particularly in terms of amenity and about small plots to size ratios in respect of the surrounding area. So that's taken into account as well. So that's really the reasons as to how judgments like this have been come to. It is looking at its case-by-case basis. It's looking at the constraints of the sites, its surrounding, and its proximity to the surrounding neighbouring properties. In this case, you have a property that was considered to be very close to adjoining properties with a pretty small garden area to the rear as well. And all of those factors would have been taken into account in coming to the reason that's been issued to refuse the application.
Chair, can I just come back slightly? Sorry.
Yes, sure.
Just because sunlight was mentioned there, and I don't know, maybe I've got my bearings wrong. So that this is on, if you're going to talk about that row of houses on Silver Hill Place, so you think of the other 2 bungalows that are just in front of it, they are, when I'm looking on the map, they are on the south elevation. Well, they're on the south of the site. This is on the north end, and that car park is on the north side. Surely the sunlight, if you're north of the other buildings, the likelihood is that they're going to be blocking your sun to a degree rather than you're blocking theirs. Am I right with that? Because the sun will, I believe the sun will rise on that on the rear elevation and set on the front elevation.
Andrew?
Yep.
That would generally be true, but there are windows located on the western boundary of this property, which of course can obviously cause concern. And from what I could see when I've looked through this application, it does look like one of those windows, at least one of those windows on the western elevation, is serving a habitable room. So there is a potential there for particularly sunlight or daylight, particularly in terms of sunlight, when the sun would be coming to the west, there is a potential there for loss of sunlight into those western windows, but also general loss of daylight as a result of the close proximity of the site. So yeah, in this case, if you look back at the photographs, there are some windows on that western gable of 5 Silver Hill Place.
Yeah, we can actually see on the photograph that's up on the screen at the moment, is it a window to the right, and maybe is it patio doors or a lower window? I'm not sure. These are the windows that you're talking about, Andrew, that if a potential building was in that plot, it would overshadow that particular property, the existing property.
There is a potential for that, and also as well, if whatever boundary treatment would be required on that elevation that's between the proposed dwelling and the western dwelling, which you would also need to factor in as well as to what boundary treatment could be required to ensure a sufficient level of privacy between the 2 adjoining uses.
Thanks, Andrew. Has that been helpful, Councillor Giusti?
Yeah, no, that's right.
Thanks very much. Ian, Councillor Corrales, I did say I would come back to you. So I'll let you back in. Are you putting forward a motion for a site visit?
No, definitely no, Chair. No, content with the mood of the committee. No, I'm absolutely happy with that. That's sound. So it's to the least, but I've got my points, but I probably would want to come back at the point where we're in session, Chair, if you would allow me, and just make my comments just to reflect on what my own view is. Thank you.
Okay, so I take it, members, now that we've got sufficient enough information to determine this today. We're in agreement. Don't see any dissent. Okay, we're in session. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, fine.
Right, so I suppose when I looked at this, the only difference, like I said, I've already outlined in as far as the site visit would have done, but we're by that. I just think the size and scale of this house, it's no far away from me, being honest. I don't think there'd be any overshadow. We haven't got any information in front of us, but you look at the size of these houses, actually, going by the way the sun rises and sets. I think it's 5 of Silverhill Place. If it was to be, if it was to be, I think, to be built as it shows, I don't think the shadow would reach it personally. Even in the winter months, I don't think it'd reach it. Never mind the summer. But I mean, I'm comfortable with it. I suppose what we have got as well in Gretton in particular, it's almost unique, is that we've got a situation where we find when sites like this lie vacant for too long, they start to become occupied, and that is a concern of mine, whereby it's not planning, but it is a concern, Chair. But I mean, I'm minded. I think it is subjective when looking at this in regards to this, and I was reflecting back myself on when about 4 or 6 weeks ago, where there was one in Stranraer, I think it was, forget the name of the road, but it was where Tommy Sloan lived not so far away from. I can remember that statement. And saying that planning subjective, this would have been up for approval on that site quite considerably. Taken and it was recommended approval, but it was actually refused. But I would have been opposite-minded to this one. I'm sure this is with the prefabs, if I remember. These were all prefabs at one time. But they are smaller houses. They're usually for elderly people down in this area. I'm sure it is, for why there's all different mixtures there. But Chairman, I'm certainly minded to approve this, but obviously listen to what other members are thinking.
So you're actually minded to reverse the decision of the appointed officer?
Yes, Chair, I am.
The determination of the plan has already been done, so we're here to either uphold or reverse the decision. So you're putting that forward as a motion.
I'm sitting on it at the moment, Chair, but I probably will. I'd like to hear what other people are thinking as well. I don't like to think it's just me that's looking like that. It looks like an opportunity site in
No,
that's what it looks like.
Fair comment, thanks, Ian. Councillor Justin, Andrew.
Actually, I'm sort of on the same mind frame as Councillor Carruthers. To me, looking at this site, it kind of looks like it's begging to be developed. It looks like it just looks like it's been forgotten when the rest of the development's been going on. I have no understanding as to why it's been left like that, but it looks the ideal size for one of these small cottages. I'm not particularly. I don't have much concern about the overshadowing if it's to the same kind of level of development as what those other cottages next door are. I don't think, as Ian said, I don't think there will be much, if any, overshadowing. I'd be quite happy to put forward that way reverse the decision taken by officers on this one.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I looked at this very carefully, and I also studied it, as I said previously, on Google Maps, which showed its situation very well. And this isn't the only green space in this housing development. There are other corner sites almost similarly sized. And I know in planning we don't create a precedent. We decide on what's in front of us for each individual application. So after I read all the documents, did my research, I was actually completely, I couldn't make my mind up, to be quite honest. And I thought I'll attend and make a decision on what I hear on the day, because honestly, I could see reasons for rejecting it. It does go against the very geometrical and very open aspect of this housing development. It creates an anomaly, shall we say. It breaks the mould somewhat. But in this region, we are very short of quality housing. This particular vacant space is within walking distance of the shops. Okay, it uses a bit of green space, but the site actually looks as if it's been prepared for a development. So I think I would agree with my other two councillors. I would go against the officer's decision on this and approve this plot for housing.
Thanks very much, Councillor Young. I mean, I suppose when the officer was looking at the site, it was the density of the surrounding areas, and looking at the location plan, you could clearly see how dense these areas are. And like you said, there's a number of corner sites in that particular area that may lead to further development, and you end up with even more dense, or the density gets even greater. So, but who have we got there? Is it Andrew Justy, Councillor Justy?
Yes, sir.
You got your hand up. You wanting to?
Oh, sorry, that's
Legacy
Legacy.
land.
Sorry, that's Legacy.
Okay. So have we got a proposal for to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and the seconder?
I'm happy to go with that, Chair.
Same here. If Andrew proposed that, I'm happy to second it, especially after what's being said. I think John Young, Councillor Young summed it up very well. He was right in the money with me. You could look at this either way. They say it's unbalanced. It's quite an interesting case. Think, what is it? Because you've got a clear building line at the front on Logan Road, which it complies with. But you think, is it? But actually, look at the site in the polar diagonal opposite to that, which I'm not sure what the road that is because I can't make it out. But anyways, because it looks like an extension to the house there, it's every bit as much build up on that area. So, Chair, keen to see what kind of conditions, because there is roads conditions and directives and such like mentioned within here. So,
we'll get to that in a minute, Ian. I mean, obviously, I could propose that we uphold it, but I don't think I would get a seconder by the looks of things. So it clearly is the decision for the LRB, and obviously, if we do reverse this, we need to, find out what conditions and reasons that members would need to see attached, if any. So, I mean, obviously, Andrew will fill us in with the standard conditions. But if that's the decision of the LRB, and then I'll probably get Claire just to confirm that decision. Claire?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Take the local review body are agreeing to reverse reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve the application. I just wanted to be clear whether members were minded that this application was accorded with policy, or whether it was an exception to policy for specific reasons before we get on to conditions.
Thanks, Claire. Members? Councillor Carruthers?
I think the two things is the pattern development and the density along with the amenity. I didn't feel it because of the type of housing. I felt like it did that. For me, it complied. It wasn't something we had to make an exception for. There's not that many sites like this in Grant, I don't think. Or certainly not in this area, but looks at what I can see on the block plan. But I felt like it was on balance, but it complied.
Thanks, Ian. Andrew, Tuesday?
Actually, I agree with Ian with what he said there. Our reason for refusal here is that the officers don't believe it complies with policy. I personally feel it does. I feel like that site, it just feels like a wee gap site that needs to be filled in just to finish off that row of houses. That covers reasons one. The location, size of the site, and the amenities. I don't feel like it's going to affect the amenity at all, really. If you look at the corner of the other two houses, I honestly don't feel it's going to affect the meeting. I don't think the blocking of sunlight is going to be a big issue here at all either. And in fact, it actually might increase immunity because you've got a corner there on a public footpath. If there's nobody looking after that piece of land, if people just throw litter or rubbish just starts to whirlwind in a site like that, it's going to be kept neat and tidy, you would hope. So I think it would actually increase the immunity of the area. And that's what I would say. And also, there's no objections from the neighbours. There's only supporters. So that's the fact that with the lack of objections, I feel like the amenity argument loses a bit of its strength.
Okay, so I take it that members are saying that it meets the terms of LDP2 policy OP2 and associated LDP2 supplementary guidance. It's just purely the members' perspective on this. I don't know if that would be competent. Claire, do you want to just keep us right on that?
Yes, Chair, members are minded that the application complies with policy, then for the reasons that they've given, and that's clear. I just wanted to be clear for the decision. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. So, members, what about conditions? Are there any conditions that need to be applied apart from the standard ones? I don't know if it'd be worth it. I see Laura's got her hand up. Laura?
Thank you, Chair. Within the report, Roads and their consultation response have noted that they would be looking for conditions. There's also another point which I was wanting to raise, and under the heading Developer Contributions, which is on page 30, it is stated that there should be a payment of £1,250 towards the connection to public water supply. Now, the planner has stated that this should be paid beforehand. What I would suggest is also required is a very short Section 69 agreement recording the fact that the payment has been made, what it is to be used for, and in what circumstances it would be repaid. Legal services do have a template that we use for Gretna. I appreciate that it is a relatively small amount of money, £1,250, but we are required when we receive sums within our supplementary guidance to have a legal agreement to regulate its payment and also its repayment. So I would suggest that in addition to the conditions, it is also stated that there should be a legal agreement completed within 6 months. That's what you would normally put in a decision.
Thanks very much, Laura. That's been helpful. Councillor Young?
Thank you, Chair. Can we make it a condition that the finish in the walls, the type of walls, the roof covering, the type of tiles matches exactly the properties neither on the road, and also the roof line should also be, every effort should be made to make sure the roof line is of a similar height as per its neighbouring houses.
That's normally delegated to the officers, John, but I'll bring Andrew in on that particular point. Maybe he can just help with that. Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I sort of pre-prepared some potential conditions in advance. Laura's already touched upon the Section 69 agreement. I'm just about to double check whether this needs an education contribution. Right? My feeling is that would it be an individual house, it doesn't, but I'd just like to check that before we conclude this item. There's roads conditions as well that have been touched upon as well. A condition regarding material finishes for the dwelling houses can be attached. I would suggest to you that you also consider conditions regarding proposed boundary enclosures to the site and also proposed landscaping of the site as well. In the meantime, I would just double check the education thing in the supplementary guidance.
Thanks very much. Has that been helpful, Councillor Young? Laura, you want
So
to
that's been very helpful, and I wonder if we can leave the fine detail of that in Andrew's safe hands.
It was
Laura?
It was just to confirm that I know that in a single house you don't require an education contribution.
Thanks for that confirmation, Laura. So, Claire, do you want to confirm what the LRB's decision was on agenda item 4, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the LRB are agreeing to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve the application, given that it complies with policy, particularly OP2 and associated supplementary guidance, subject to a number of conditions, being those conditions that are listed in your papers on page 33. There's C107, 121, 122, 124 and 144 with a couple of directives there. You've got the condition about the developer contributions to the public water supply with the short section 69 agreement, and there's also conditions, standard conditions about the finishing, landscaping and boundary finishes.
Thanks very much, Claire. So if members are content with that, we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is Low Barn Miltock Farm, Dunraggett. Claire, do you want to take us through that part of the report, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Item 5, Low Barnaltach Farm, Dunraggett, Stranraer, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house, 21-1438 PIP. You've got the usual documents in your papers, notice of review, report and handling, observations of appointed officer, planning application form, decision notice, relevant extracts from LDP2 and the photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal in this case are the proposed development fails to meet any of the criteria in Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 Policy H3, which only permits the erection of new houses in the countryside in particular circumstances, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. As such, the proposal would represent sporadic residential development in the countryside contrary to the provisions of the development plan as set out in LDP 2 Policy H3 and associated supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside. The requested method of determination is, in this case, is by an assessment of the review documents only with no further procedure. Grounds stated in the notice of review are in summary. As discussed at the previous LRB meeting, amended location fully over footprint of redundant buildings. Low Barnaltach Farm has been redundant for a considerable period of time, with all associated buildings falling into a state of disrepair as not being in use or nor maintained. The applicant did seek to convert and extend, but simply was not feasible due to structural condition, as can be evidenced as being beyond economic repair and retention as reason to replace with a dwelling house. The application site is set in a rural location, which is a redundant farm, which is simply a cluster of buildings. LDP Policy H3, housing in the countryside, beneficial redevelopment of brownfield sites should be applied to this location. Every planning application should be considered on its own planning merits, but should also be transparent throughout the region when making decisions. But clearly this has not been the case. Given its own individual merit, this planning application complies with Policy H3 housing in the countryside, but for some reason the planning officer has not given consideration to the relative planning policies, associated supplementary guidance and submitted drawings. At the local review body at the meeting on the 28th of April 2021, members discussed the application and decided the proposed dwelling house was mostly sited in the field as opposed to the redundant buildings it seeks to replace. In discussion, members agreed to uphold the planning officer's decision and refusal sited mostly in the field, and asked Mr David Sutty, who was present at the meeting, if a further application was submitted and proposals cited over the footprint of the redundant building should be approved. Please see amended drawings of the proposed dwelling sited within the footprint of the redundant buildings it seeks to replace, and also a barn-level survey is requested, which duly undertaken. No neighbours object to the proposal. No mention of the previous LRB was mentioned in the report. We members discussed with David Sutton, who was present at the meeting, if a further application was submitted and proposals cited over the footprint of the redundant building should be approved. And no mention of the concrete base and associated walls was mentioned in the report. The footprint of the proposed dwelling is within the footprint of the redundant buildings and a concrete base with no part cited over agricultural land. Please see photographs of redundant buildings, concrete base and remains of walls taken down by a previous farmer. Make no mistake, this is not agricultural ground. Fully support the need for planning control, believe it must be consistent and fair, judged in its own individual merit, but unfortunately for some reason or another this has not been the case, and sincerely trust the LRB will agree with our reasoning and respectively approve this planning application. You have the relevant development plan policies, LDP Plan 2, Policy OP1, OP2, H3, NE5, NE13, IN9, T2 and supplementary guidance, housing and countryside and design quality and place making. So the main issues for the LRB to consider are: do the LRB members wish to take the late additional post-determination information associated into account when assessing this review? If so, do members need to be satisfied they have sufficient reasoning as to why this information could not have been submitted when the application was determined by the appointed officer? Does the proposal accord with LDP 2 Policy H3 and associated supplementary guidance? Are any of the relevant criteria within that policy met? Does the proposal represent the beneficial regeneration of a brownfield site as defined in LDP 2? And members conclude the proposal is contrary to the terms of LDP 2 in this regard. Are there any other material considerations which would justify a decision which would represent a departure from the terms of the development plan, and if so, what grounds would such a decision be made? And the members are minded not to uphold the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal. What set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if any? And if members are instead minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision, what changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required? So again, you have it's for members first to decide if you have sufficient information to determine the review. Again, it's confirmed there's no representations for any party here today. You have the same procedures available to you as outlined previously at the previous item, and again you have an independent planning advisor present for this case. He's not had any involvement in the case. He's not the case officer. The appointed officer for this application is here purely to provide independent advice as needed on planning matters of planning policy, law or process. And again, you have your solicitor present. So again, Chair, I would ask you to lead the LRB through the papers for this case and determine firstly if you have sufficient information. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. Before I bring Andrew in, the main issues the LRB members wish to take late additional post-determination information submitted into account when assessing. Have we got that information? Can anyone help me? Claire?
Chair,
David?
where the extra information is the stuff on page 105 to 107, which has been submitted with the application, the notice of review, which I think wasn't before the appointed officer when he determined the application. Certainly that was my reading of it as well.
Right, I've got you. I didn't realise that was the additional information. So, do we have to make a decision, Claire, whether we take that into consideration? Looking for guidance here.
Yes, sorry, Chair. It's for members to decide whether you to take that into consideration and whether you feel there are sufficient reasons given as to why that wasn't before the officer when they made the decision initially. So for members to decide.
Yeah, that's clear. Thanks very much, Claire. Councillor Carruthers? You're on mute.
So, sorry, Chair, did you say try to get me in there? I missed that.
Yeah.
Aye. No, sorry, Chair. So just on that particular point in regards to the extra information, my understanding, I mean, I've read it as I went through. So I take it, is it for each individual to consider whether they feel it's relevant as part of their consideration? Because I did think it was relevant. I had a question on it as we get further into the debate. But I've certainly considered it, Chair.
I think we need to be satisfied that we should take this additional information. That's my understanding of it. Is yours different, Ian? Did you think it was just individual members?
No, Chair, just because it's because if David's correct what he's saying, I think we're agreed that he is. It's 105, page 105, page 107. The information is there. It is in front of us. So it's whether we consider that as part of our decision making. I would say that it's implicit that we probably will, and we do. But and I probably got just a question touching on parts of the things that are mentioned. Very, very light questions, but I think we have actually considered it. So I don't know if we really do have to consider taking it. I suppose that's the point I'm trying to make. Or maybe we're going around about it a difficult way, making that point. But I think we've considered it anyways, Chair.
Yeah, I would agree. Before I take in Councillor Giusti and Councillor Young, Laura, do you want to just come in on that point, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The regulations the legislation's quite clear. Section 43B says that if there's any matter which was not before the appointed person at the time the determination reviewed was made, then unless that party can demonstrate that the matter could not have been raised before that time, or that it's not being raised before that time was a consequence of exceptional circumstances, then it shouldn't be there. There's almost a two-stage process that you have to go through. This additional material is part of the review papers because it was submitted along with the note of review. If it raises a new matter, now there's a difference between something being new material and something being a new matter, but if it raises new matters, then you have to, as an LRB, consider why it wasn't raised before, and that it's not being raised before that time was a consequence of exceptional circumstances. So first of all, you have to decide, is it actually raising new matters, or is it following on from matters which were originally in front of the appointed officer?
Thanks, Laura. That's been helpful. Councillor Giusti and then Councillor Young.
But thanks, Chair. It's just a bit of clarity here. So I've listened to the YouTube recording from last time this was up under a slightly different proposal, and David did say, or Mr. Slide did say, that we would need a bat and owl survey completed because I can't remember the exact word now, but we would need that completed before we could actually grant an application. I'm not saying that I'm predetermined to grant an application, but do we have that in place today? Just so that just before we even go into this and get to a point where we maybe might be minded to grant it, and then we've not got this survey completed, we can't, and we then have to defer anyway, just to make sure that's in place. Because I think I heard Claire say earlier on that it was in the process, but I'm not sure if it's been completed.
Okay, thanks. Anyone want to clarify that point for Andrew?
Chair, yes, there was a bat and bower and owl survey submitted with the application. The document date I've got here is the 6th of July. So that definitely is on the online documentation.
Thanks very much. Has that been helpful, Councillor Giusti?
Absolutely.
Thanks very much. Councillor Young?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Laura, for your explanation. And I agree with Councillor Carruthers. My opinion is that pages 105, 107 expands and give a fuller explanation of parts of the original report. So I'm quite happy to accept them, and it would allow us to make a better decision. And it also stops an appeal because some material would be excluded from the decision we eventually take today. So I'm quite happy to include 105 and 107 in our reasonings today. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. Is this the right time? Take advice for yourself, and maybe David City in particular. David, because when I'm reading page 107, it refers to a previous application. I'm definitely of the mind, and I think we all are, that each case in its own merits as it's been presented. You probably haven't even seen this coming back in, David. That's the kind of usual stance. That's what we understand. But obviously, you've made comment previously in regards to this. It sounds like Andrew's saying he's listened back. I haven't listened back to the audio footage to see what was said. But if that page 107 is correct, you would have thought that when it came back in and it was moved in regards to the footprint closer to the farm as being proposed, as been advised, you could say, through the committee earlier, it would have been up for approval here. So I just wondered, is this the right place to bring that point up, or is it not? Maybe it should be later on in the case.
I'll ask David just to come in on that, because I want to move this on if we possibly can. So, David, you just want to clarify that, please?
Yes, I'm happy to do so, Chair. Just for clarification, as with the previous application, I have not had any involvement with the current one. Wasn't the case officer, wasn't the appointed officer. So my only involvement with the previous case, as with this one, was acting as the independent planning advisor on it. Now, obviously, if you go back and listen to it, there was advice which I gave in respect of every application has to be considered on its own merits. The discussion that the LRB went on probably went down a route that it maybe shouldn't have, where it was making comments on whether or not they would support a future application. As far as my advice went, that had actually covered, I think, on page 130 of the agenda papers, where I note that the appointed officer has made reference to the fact that at no point did I state that the future applications may be determined. So it's absolutely the case. Every application had to be considered on its own merit. The previous one that was considered by a previous LRB and was unanimously refused is materially different in that the siting of the building has moved. So in as far as that there was a previous application and a previous LRB decision, that is obviously part of the planning history. It's covered on page 112 of your agenda papers, just for information there. But it's got no more bearing than that, to be perfectly honest.
Thanks, David. Andrew Tuesday, Councillor Tuesday.
Thanks, Chair. I know I want to move this on. It's just in relation to page 105, etc., and that being new evidence. I refer that then. I then go to page 119, where the planning officer says that on their site visit that they want to be unaccompanied and unapproached. Now, I understand there's a COVID pandemic going on, etc., but would the likes of those that concrete foundation or whatever, or those, or what's been added in on page 105, would that have maybe been when they're on site with the planner and the applicant? That's when I think you would get to that nitty gritty, isn't it? You would see that, and that's when things like that pointed out. Have we missed this because of the COVID regulations? Maybe that's just a suggestion, maybe an observation of mine. Just because that, aye. I think I've made my point now.
Right, I'll get David to try and clarify that point as well. David?
Obviously, I'm not here today to actually give any commentary on the actual case officer or the appointed officers, because my role here is to advise yourselves. If it's of assistance, what I can maybe do now to move things on is, if Fiona goes through the photos, I think that will answer some of your questions. Because there's indeed a photo of the land in question.
I appreciate that, David. I'm sure other members would. So, yeah, we're just getting to that point where we might as well just go through the presentation, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay, so again, these are exactly the same photos that you've got in your papers on page 183 to 189. So the first image is an aerial image, and I think you can see quite clearly there where you've got the footprint of the existing farm buildings, The ones on the left-hand side are the ones which are of particular relevance to this. And then that area of land is, there's some debate on this, note in the papers, but certainly from my viewing of this from above, I would view that as being agricultural land just beyond. So the next slide, please. 2018 photo taken from the time that the site was marketed. So it shows the condition of the building at that time. And the next slide shows it from a previous visit that the case officer did in 2019, when it had moved into ownership of the present applicant. And then the next one is a more current image. And again, it's showing the same building that would be removed to make way for the development of the house. The next photo is looking north. So you're seeing it end on, and the other steading buildings in the distance. There's an interior shot next, just to let you see what's inside the building that would be demolished, and another similar one. And then you've got a third shed that would actually be demolished as well. And the next photo, I think, is probably what Councillor Giusti was talking about here, where you can see that any concrete pad that was in the field is certainly clearly no longer visible. It's very much under grass now, but that's what is being referred to in the previous submissions. So I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions, but from my view of that, it's certainly nothing obvious on that field there. And the next one's looking in the opposite direction, looking north again, out in the field. And then you've got a photo from in the field looking to the rear of the buildings. And then from further within the field, looking at the overall cluster of buildings. And the final photo is one looking from the C18W public road and across the field to the various buildings. Thanks, Chair.
You're muted, Chair. I can't hear you.
Sorry, apologies. Thanks very much, David. I was just asking, was that a legacy hand you had up there, Andrew?
Sorry, yes.
Thanks very much. Okay, members, we'll go through the papers, starting with section 1, which is notice of review and related documents, pages 91 to 107. Any questions or comments on that section? No. Section 2 is report on handling and related correspondence, pages 111 to 126. Any comments, questions? No. Section 3, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, pages 129 to 132. Comments, questions? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. So much in this particular case, I think, depends on the definition of agricultural land. Now, on page 131, 3.8, as referenced above, any agriculture use is explicitly excluded from being considered as brownfield land, as per the current glossary on page 244 of LDP2. Now, when you look at page 244 of LDB2, I expected a broader and a tighter, sharper definition. It actually says brownfield site, previously developed land and premises, including the curtilage of buildings, which may still be partially occupied or used, most commonly associated with derelict urban land with redundant industrial buildings, excludes agricultural, forestry and previously used land, which now has nature conservation and recreational value. So it excludes agricultural land which now has nature conservation or recreation value. I'm not sure this particular area does have or nature value. It's just a redundant farm building, an old barn, basically. So I'm not sure if it does fit that actual definition. And
Yeah,
I would like Laura's advice, Chair.
Yeah, I see Laura just put her hand up, so I'll just bring Laura in to advise you on that, Councillor Young. Laura?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Young. This is a definition which I spent a bit of time looking at before today, because like yourself, Councillor Young, I was wondering, where does the comma come in? Is it that it's agricultural land, or is it agricultural land which has now nature conservation or recreation value? What I saw in looking at the last LRB recording was that David set it out that it's the second, because Councillor Hislop was chair on that occasion and raised that point from the very start, asking how the exclusion was to be read. So rather than seeing it as agricultural land, which now has nature conservation or recreation value, it's three separate categories, being agricultural land, forestry land, or previously used land which now has nature conservation or recreation value. And Shona McCoy from the policy team in planning has confirmed that that was how the policy was drafted.
Thanks, Laura. Has that been helpful, Councillor Young?
It's been helpful, but it's still open to interpretation. I know that you with your legal training have narrowed it down completely, but me with a non-legal training and just, if you like, everyday language, could read it the other way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can totally see two possible interpretations. And that's why I looked back at how it was interpreted at the last meeting, and also sought clarification from my colleagues in planning as to how this was applied. And what I've been advised is that the consistent interpretation is the latter, that there's three distinct groups and it's just agricultural land.
It's a shame we have this situation, because this is the key to this whole item, in my opinion. Thanks, Laura.
You're absolutely right. Yes, the definition, the interpretation of the exclusion is the key to how this should be determined, because if it was decided differently, then you would actually be going against policy.
Thanks, Laura. If there are no other comments or questions on section 3, we'll move to section 4, which is the planning application form submitted on the 6th of July 2021, associated plans and supporting information, pages 135 to 162. Comments, questions? No. Section 5 is the decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 1st of December 2021, pages 167 to 169. Any comments or questions? No. Section 7, which is the photos of the application site and the locality, pages 183 to 189, which we've seen on the screen as a presentation. Any comments or questions on that? No. Okay, members, with that in mind, do we have sufficient enough information to make a determination today? I'll take silence that we do. Okay, members, we're now in session, so I'll open it up to the floor. Councillor Giusti.
Chair, going back to the previous committee meeting, the previous LRB, and I know that this is for its own merit, but the previous one had a lot of sympathy from the previous committee, from the previous LRB. There was a lot of sympathy for this one. And I think the previous councillors and myself, and from what I'm hearing from John Young, that if these buildings were destroyed and demolished and replaced with a new house, would that be a detriment to the countryside and to the local area? Personally, I don't think so. And from what we can see, I don't know if you can repurpose that tin shed barn in the red there, and that small blockhouse just at the other side of it. I honestly don't know how you could repurpose them into something that would be aesthetically pleasing or even a benefit to the area. So I'm actually quite sympathetic to this proposal. If as the extra information that we have in front of us, that there is a concrete block underneath the part of that grassland, and the proposal is going into that, I'd be interested to see that. And considering this is a plan permission in principle, it would have to come back to us anyway. So I'd maybe be, I'm verging on the side of maybe approving for applying permission in principle, and I would probably want a condition that anything that was going to go on here would have to come to planning committee for us to then have the final say on that. And I would want it evidenced that there was that that concrete ground underneath the area. That's kind of what I'm thinking at the minute, Chair, but I want to hear what other people are saying.
Thanks very much, Councillor Giusty. Well, I'm just reflecting back to what Laura was saying. You know, I mean, if there was, you know, something that's already overgrown, or it's returned back to sort of grassland or agricultural land, I'm sure that's what you were referring to, Laura. Maybe you can just clarify that point. So, I mean, my understanding is that if you know, if there was a concrete base there and it's been removed, and then you know, it's been returned back to what is farming land. But I don't know if you want to comment on that, Laura, just on that particular point.
It's on the question of the justification for this application is that it's a brownfield site. And in terms of the supplementary guidance, agricultural use is excluded from being brownfield. Does that help you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the photographs, and in my mind, it clearly looks agricultural. But I see others wanting to come in, so
Can I come back on that, Chair? Sorry.
I'll come back to you, Andrew. I'll bring Councillor Carruthers in first, and then I'll come back to you on the same point. Councillor Carruthers.
Actually, so it's a beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site. That's what we're talking about in real terms here. I think if you ask just about any farmer in Dumfries and Galloway, probably Scotland, the whole of the UK, listen, if is this agricultural land or not, they'd probably put the test and say, okay, if my plough will go through it, it's agricultural land, I can grow things on it. I was involved with wasn't a committee or anything, but I was involved because I did support a site in Ecclefechan. So it'd been a plain field, it was a brownfield site. I would always say it was a brownfield site, so did locals, but it had been left vacant for years, and it had grown over green, small, like an inch of grass. So when you looked at it, it looked like a greenfield site, but it was absolutely 100% a brownfield site. It had been identified previously in the local development plan and such like. And I would still, if we're saying quite clearly 6 inches of concrete or so sitting below that, what's grown over, whether it's been, again, it could be manure, it could be anything that's created that, I don't know. Maybe that's the point that needs to be absolutely established in this particular case. But if that is it, I mean, I think if there's 6 inches of concrete sitting below there, I would determine that as being a brownfield site. But that's my own opinion, Chair. Yeah,
I appreciate what you're saying, but we can't determine that just looking at photographs here. So, Andrew, do you want to come back in?
Thanks, Chair. So, in that stroke, sorry if I've not understood that wrong, in that stroke, no agricultural building, their old barns, etc., and their curtilage can be regarded as a brownfield site, then? Is that what we're saying?
Well, it's up to members how they interpret, I'm sure. But I see Laura wants to come back in just to give us a bit of advice.
It was actually to suggest that the planning advisors brought on that point, Chair.
Thank you. David?
Thanks, Chair. Could you repeat the question just so I'm getting at exactly what you want me to answer?
Andrew?
Sure. So going from Laura's summary of the situation, anything that is anything where what nature has regrown over, let's say if it's moss, that's still nature, etc. And that regrows over like a bit of tarmac or a bit of concrete. So that can never be, and that's common in many of these old agricultural building groups. Is that the land has been reclaimed by nature, and you will have a lot of bases. Does that mean that most of these holdings, where we've granted in the past and we've let them take into the curtilage of the old buildings, does that mean that technically they never went with policy? Are we saying that is not brownfield sites anymore?
Well, basically, you've got to differentiate between, there's a whole load of different categories which are acceptable within policy H3. And one of them is steading conversions. So if you have a steading that is capable of being converted, then that's supported under policy. I think the concern here, from what I'm picking up by the appointed officers, is very much the fact that what you've got here is not a traditional agricultural steading that can be converted. It is, to use the colloquial term, a crinkly tin building that it's seen better days. Now, if the applicant is concerned about the appearance of the building, there's nothing to prevent him from demolishing the building to improve the thing, but that does not in itself give justification for a house. Otherwise, you go down the dangerous slope of letting any modern agricultural building fall into disrepair, and your reward for that is getting a house because it's a brownfield site. So I think that's the concern that's being flagged up here. Certainly, I was having a look as well at the supplementary guidance, paragraph 4.2 and 5.2 and 5.3 gives more information on that. I'll read it out if that helps. A rural brownfield site must be identified on the basis of its current condition. Sufficient evidence of previous development must be apparent on inspection. Historic use, unless physically evident, will not be taken into consideration. If a structure has been raised and the land reinstated as agricultural land, the site will be considered as agricultural land and not as a rural brownfield site for the purposes of this policy. And 5.3 goes on to say, rural brownfield sites exclude agriculture, forestry and previously used land which has now nature, conservation or recreational value. A site which has been disused or redundant for so long that it has become naturalised, for example, by the growth of mature trees, is likely to have significant biodiversity value, and its development would be contrary to policy. So, really, what this is looking at is an unsightly former, redundant industrial buildings in the countryside. That's really what it's looking at, and that is why agriculture has been mentioned as a specific exclusion. So I hope that gives a bit more background to what I think was the concerns of the appointed officer, particularly, as I say, if you're in any doubt, have a look at page 129 through to 132. That was a very clear explanation of why the appointed officer felt that this was contrary to policy.
Thanks, David. That's been helpful. Councillor Young?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David. Yes, the explanations today have been very technical, but they've clarified my understanding. And I followed through Robert Duncan's analysis of this situation very carefully in these pages that David talked about. So I would actually propose we go with the officer's recommendation. I'm quite content that the correct decision regarding agricultural land was made here. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Young. Yeah, it's we're not going with the officer's recommendation. We're actually upholding the decision that has already been made. So if you're putting that forward as a proposal, I'm happy to second that.
Yes,
Would you stay?
Thanks, Chair. I've already lost this one, but I would propose that we reverse the officer's decisions, and pass this as I believe it is a brownfield site. If that's not acceptable in policy, I'm happy to go with an exemption to policy.
So, well, first of all, we'll need to see if your amendment or a motion is competent to exception. I'm not sure if it is, but I'll bring in anyone, David, possibly, or Claire.
Certainly, I think some things are ones which you can reasonably take a view on, like the previous application, whether or not it complied. I think my personal view here is that this is a very clear case of it being contrary to the Council's adopted policy, and indeed Laura's advice earlier was very much to that extent. So certainly I think it would have to be an exception to policy that you'd be wanting to approve it, and I think we would need to hear grounds as to why it would merit an exception to policy.
Thanks, David. Councillor Carruthers?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I wonder if I can ask a question of David, and it is linked to this, obviously. My understanding is, David, that there's been a number of changes, permittable development rights in regards to agricultural sector, and potentially, was it even, so we've never seen, I don't think we've seen this at the Economy and Resources Committee yet. I thought we might have seen a paper by now. If we have, we've missed it. I've missed it. But certainly, the level of permittable development rights, I think, went as far as portal buildings, which is what in real terms I would class this as pretty much, whether it's timber, whether it's steel structure, it looks like a portal building. Go back to the explanation, what again, as John's already said, and both John's actually, it shed a lot of light on my understanding of agriculture, put it far better into context. So I think it's got to be difficult for you, Andrew, to put a competent motion up today, certainly whatever way it is, but I'm sure if you're determined, I'll be away. But I mean, I think there's a lot of permittable development rights now. The changes is our local development plan is really what I'm thinking. Is there a conflict between what we've got in it now and what Scottish Government are trying to achieve?
Thanks, Councillor Carruthers. So, got a motion, which is to uphold.
Chair, I wouldn't mind if David City would answer that. If you was coming in to do that,
yeah,
that's all right. Thank you.
Apologies. No, please do come in, David.
Yes, no problem. I was coming in there to try and provide an answer. Yes, you're right. There was a national change in legislation in terms of permitted development rights in certain circumstances, and they're quite confined. But it is involving a conversion of a building. Just to remind members that this is a planning permission principle to demolish all the buildings on the site and put up a completely new house. So it wouldn't actually make any difference, the change to the permitted development rights to this particular proposal.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Ian. So we've got a motion to uphold the decision, and we had an amendment from Councillor Giusti. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Giusti, and is it a competent motion?
I don't know if I've got a sector, but so I would say I'd put forward an amendment that way. Pass this against planning policy as an exemption to planning policy, and that is due to I think it's quite obvious that this is a dilapidated small building group. I think that if you can evidence that that concrete does go further back into that paddock, I think you have got a strong case for a brownfield site, and I think that a residential building would be much better and much more suited to that zone than that current tin red shed and that white out building. And I think it'd be better for the local economy. I think it'd be better for a local family, letting an agricultural family live in the countryside, work the countryside. I just see benefits. I don't see any negatives here. It's not like we're building an absolute, completely isolated house in the middle of the countryside. We've got a defined building group here. It's to work the land. I think it's very appropriate that we allow this and allow a family to actually live out here and work the land. And I don't know if that's competent or not, but that's what I'm going with, Chair.
Thanks very much. Unfortunately, you haven't got a seconder, so it looks like the decision will be...
Chair,
Yeah,
Chair, if that's all right. No, so I said I don't want Andrew being left out in a limb there, and ultimately we understand how things are going. But I think he's putting up some strong arguments for this particular case. When you look at the whole site as a whole, there's one thing I think is void from our local development plan. It's something that's come up within the Mowing Group. Actually, it's something like this. Whether it relates well to the tourism sector. So we've got a local housing strategy. That's why houses are built. But is there actual void there when it comes to tourism and the economy? But that's no what we're talking about today. But I mean, if Andrew's motion is competent, I'm happy to support him by way of seconding his motion, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Carruthers. Is the amendment competent? Claire?
Thank you, Chair. Thinking back to the advice that David Sutty provided about rural brownfield site, saying that it must be apparent on inspection, likes of the concrete base and such like. Be interested in David's thoughts on the competency of the amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. David?
Well, I was trying to scribble down some notes just as Councillor Giusti was speaking there, but trying to distill it, I think it's probably along the lines that the erection of a dwelling house on that site would be beneficial in that it would have improved visual amenity compared to the current condition of the shed. There would be some local economic and housing benefit from having a house on that site as opposed to the current condition. Is that a fair summary? It's clearly as an exception to policy. I have my reservations about it, but if members are happy to go with that, then I'm certainly, I don't think as an advisor, it's my role here to rule as to whether or not that's a competent reason to take forward today. It's a slightly different role to, say, the Planning Applications Committee.
Thanks, David. That's been helpful. Andrew and Ian, are you happy with that to go forwards?
Sorry, Chair. Thank you, Dave. I think you've summarised my waffling into a very concise motion there. Yeah, I would say what David said was absolutely correct. I would disagree on the whole policy about the brownfield sites. So, but I can't take that forward as policy. So that's where it is. I see that as a brownfield site, and that's my point that I'm going to stick to. So yeah, I'm happy to take that forward as my motion, and I think it is competent. I mean, because we are going as an exception from policy, and I've given my reasons. I think it'd be a better use for that to be a residential house rather than two dilapidated sheds.
Okay, thank you for that. So Claire, we have a motion and an amendment. Do you just want to read out which one's which, please, and then we'll go to the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We have a motion proposed by Councillor Young, seconded by yourself, to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse for the same reasons as stated in the papers. We have an amendment proposed by Councillor Giusti, seconded by Councillor Carruthers, to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve the application as an exception to policy due to the site being dwelling site being beneficial, improved visual amenity, and improving the economic amenity as well. Basically, improving the dilapidated buildings that it's replacing. Okay, so going to the vote then, Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Giusti.
Amendment.
Councillor Young.
Motion.
Okay, we have 2 votes each for the motion and amendment. Chair, would you like to use your casting vote?
Yes, I'll use it for the motion, please.
Okay, motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, members. I don't have any urgent business that's needing a decision made today, so just like to thank everybody for their attendance and enjoy the rest of the day or the rest of the afternoon. So thanks everyone once again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye.
Bye.